Hi, I'm Greg Berninger, Ghent town historian. On today's trip into Ghent history, we're going to explore questions of Indian names and why, where I'm standing, I believe is the place in Ghent that epitomizes Ghent history. Where are we? We are in Squampamock. Route 66 is just over there. Ghent-Melonville Road, or County 9, is right here, and I'm standing along Cemetery Road on the border of the Ghent Union Cemetery. Let's start with the name Squampamock. In many 19th century history books, the name Squampamock is used to refer to this area. And in fact, the 1976 Ghent history was actually called Squampamock. Now, when I first became town historian and was making the media rounds, I stirred up a little controversy when I declared myself a Squampamock skeptic. I hadn't seen any good sources yet on this being called Squampamock, and I'm always very careful with my sources and the information that I share with you, as careful as I can be. But last year I found in the 1815 meeting minutes of the Ghent Reformed Church a mention of Squampamock. And the Ghent Dutch Reformed Church congregants and the Lutheran congregants were going to build a church together right here, and the description was referred to as Squampamock. Of course, in 1815 I would have been standing in the northeastern corner of Claverick at that time, because originally, as far as European settlement, this was the district of Claverick. The next reference that I found was in Spafford's Gazetteer, a sort of guidebook of the day that was published in 1824. Spafford wrote, "There is yet in some use, particularly among the old-fashioned Dutch people, a very odd name for this neighborhood, say the Van Ness Place and the J.C. Hogeboom's. Squampanock or Squampamock, but nobody knows its origins. The 1851 map of Columbia County has what we now call North Creek, which runs south through here, labeled Squampamock Creek. And Ellis's 1878 History of Columbia County tells us Squampamock, quote, is an Indian name signifying the meeting of the waters, so called from the two affluents of the Claverick Creek." So I really wanted to get down to the bottom of Squampamock. When I had the chance to have lunch with William Starna, author of the most recent book on the Mohican Indians, the Indians that inhabited northern Columbia County in this area, I asked him, what does Squampamock mean? He, friends of course with the leading Mohican language expert at none other than the Smithsonian Institute, inquired with his friend, who wrote back, unfortunately, that Squampamock has a Mohican language look, but there's something missing that renders it unanalyzable. Mr. Starna did say that Squampamock does sound like two other Mohican terms that refer to a confluence of streams. And again, those streams would be the North Creek and the Agawamek Creek, and they come to the confluence, to form the Claverick Creek in Melonville. So I can say with certainty that it's very likely that some version of the word Squampamock was probably used by Mohicans to describe this area, and that subsequent Dutch and German settlers definitely used it. And considering it's fun to say, I'm going to start using it more, as in Squampamock is one of my favorite places in Ghent, as it epitomizes Ghent history. The western boundary of Squampamock is modern-day Route 66, but that was one of the earliest roads in Columbia County. Not quite as old as the old post road in West Ghent, but this road, later the Union Turnpike, would have connected the Port of Hudson to the Berkshires. It was not unusual for someone in the Berkshires, if they needed to export some goods, to take it to Hudson. So that's an important early road that passed right through here. And of course, we see the power lines and the rail bed over there. That is from the 1838, one of the first railroads in North America, the 1838 Hudson and Berkshire Railroad, which also connected Hudson to the Berkshires, and later, and most of us today would refer to it as the Boston and Albany line. But most importantly, and maybe most Ghent, is this marvelous prime agricultural land. What lies between the boundaries of the Berkshire Hudson Rail and the Albany Union Turnpike is really what defines Ghent. The flat, fertile fields, some of the finest farmland in the Hudson Valley, where the foothills of the Taconic Range stop and the flat land to the river begins. It's just it's beautiful, as well as very, very productive to this day. And it is that combination, this is why this spot epitomizes Ghent, it is that combination of rail and agriculture that leads to Ghent's development and becoming at least a minor economic hub in Columbia County. Let's take a moment to contrast Ghent's population to its sibling town, Austerlitz. Austerlitz and Ghent, born just a week apart in 1818, had almost the same population of 2,200. Almost immediately, Austerlitz starts emptying out. Why? Well, the hills in Austerlitz are not really that conducive to farming, so as the lands of western New York and the western part of the country opened up, people digging on the hills up there moved out there to find better farmland. And Austerlitz is one of 2 towns in Columbia County that never had a railroad pass through it. By 1940, Austerlitz's population had dropped to 632. Ghent had grown to 2,948. And you have to remember, Ghent lost a little piece with a fair number of people in it to the town of Stockport in 1833. And Ghent has continued mostly to go up, and we're in the 5,000, 6,000, between 5,000 and 6,000 range. And Austerlitz has actually moved back up to the 1,100 range in population. Now, that's certainly no slight on Austerlitz. Austerlitz is a great place. I have many role models there for how to do local history. They love their history there. They do it right, and they have a lot of fun with it. Whether having lots of people is good or bad, I leave that up to you. But you can clearly see the impact of topography, Ghent with its nice flat farmland, Austerlitz with its rocky hills, and the railroad coming here and not there. You can see how that, without question, shaped the history of Ghent and Austerlitz. So, the next time you take a bicycle ride or a car ride down the Ghent-Mellonville Road, take a moment to think of the Mohican Indians, to admire the verdant landscape, and say to whomever you're with, the sun always shines in Squampamock. Again, I'm Greg Berninger, Ghent Town Historian. If there's a place in Ghent you'd like me to explore, drop me an email, historian@townofghent.org. Many thanks to my videographer today, Greg Berninger, who did the best he could under the circumstances. And folks, I look forward to seeing you around town.